So it's all for play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hi, villains, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. This is a pre-recorded podcast that I've done on a transfer link that has since been, I suppose, expounded upon by both Vitória, Guimarães, and some people who report from the Portuguese league. But it's to do with Ibrahima Bamba. And as we all know, Aston Villa have signed an agreement. 46% of the club is now owned by the same owners of Aston Villa Football Club. And at that time, there was talks that Aston Villa were really, really interested in this young player, young centre-half, defensive midfielder hybrid that we're going to talk about and we're going to look at in a moment, Ibrahima Bamba. Since that initial link came out, the owner of Vitória de Guimarães has come out and said that there's nothing concrete in that there's no guarantee that he's going to move to Aston Villa. That reporting was slightly over-exaggerated, essentially, is what he came out and said. Now, I still think Aston Villa hold an interest in this player because they should hold an interest in this player. This player is somebody who a lot of clubs in Europe are interested in at the moment, namely Villarreal were interested in him over the last year to 18 months. Now, why would that ring a bell? Oh, yeah. Unai Emery was Villarreal's manager over the last 18 months prior to moving to Aston Villa. Also, Arsenal have been linked with him as well. There was supposed very, very strong interest in a 10 million euro bid, circa around 10 million euros bid for Ibrahima Bamba from Arsenal in the January transfer window, which never transpired. And also, Atalanta have been interested. They've been credited with interest in Ibrahima Bamba as well, and that would make sense. Bamba is an Italian. He's Italian / Ivory Coast of Ivory Coast descent, and maybe a move back to Italy would be something that might interest him as well. But you know, a lot of big teams, a lot of teams that are looking to utilize their scouting networks really well. We know Villarreal scout really well. We know that Atalanta scout very, very well. They've managed to turn the tables on a lot of the traditionally big teams in Italy. They've been fighting at the top of the Serie A for quite a few years now, and they've had some really exciting players that have moved on elsewhere. And Atalanta obviously utilizing their scouting network to take a look at somebody like Ibrahima Bamba. So when Aston Villa are thrown in the same breath as that, I think it's important, obviously, with any transfer rumor or with any transfer link to Aston Villa, is to take it with a grain of salt. Number one, which we will absolutely do in this instance here. I think it probably has more meaning from the fact that we have actually signed an agreement with Vitória de Guimarães as well. And that is an important thing to take into account. But as the owner has said, nothing is set in stone from an Aston Villa point here. And I think that's fair to say. I think that is very, very fair to say. But let's take a look at this guy anyway, because he is somebody, as I said, that is really interesting to within European football. A lot of people are interested in him. And reason being is because he kind of, what I've been watching, I've watched him a good bit now since the original links. I initially went down through the Vitória de Guimarães team and I tried to pick out 2 or 3 players. There's a right back whose name absolutely escapes me right now, who I did a small piece on, but also Ibrahima Bamba was the one that just jumped off the page because he is their most saleable asset, I think, at this moment in time. He also, the really weird thing about him here is he plays in an incredibly niche role. And I think it's because they haven't really decided where his best position is going to be yet. So he kind of plays, and I hate talking about roles like as if they're directly out of FIFA or like they're directly out of Football Manager. But there is a role type called the libero. And I suppose if you were to take the literal kind of definition of what that role does, this guy fulfills that kind of position. He he comes back in. He comes back into a kind of a central center half position in a back two. So he creates that back three by popping into that position, and he's given ample opportunity at will to move forward with the ball. Now he is a center half essentially who's beginning to grow into that defensive midfielder position. And from watching him, I ultimately feel he's going to end up as a defensive midfielder. I just think that's where he's going to end up. He just looks like it. He has the physical makeup of it. He's a bit too athletic to play centre half, and I don't mean that in a derogatory term towards centre halves. But this guy, the way he moves, looks more akin to a midfielder. It's almost, and I'm not going to bring a parallel between himself and Boubacar Kamara, because Boubacar Kamara's passing range is way better than this guy's. This guy doesn't have the passing range of Boubacar Kamara. Maybe he will over time when his position is defined. I just haven't seen it. But just like Boubacar Kamara was able to step out of that centre half position into what we now see in the defensive midfielder, number 6 position, and be able to grow his game there, now that that's his defined position, I think the same thing will happen with Ibrahima Bamba, albeit he will not be. I do not think he's going to be that deep line playmaker, that the person that's able to spray the ball left, right, and centre. He's not going to turn into a Pirlo all of a sudden just because he steps into defensive midfield. That's not really his game. Where his game comes in is he's an all-action type player. He gets an awful lot of tackles in. He's a really, really good tackler. And I think that when you look at his statistical output, you look at his high tackle rate, and it's multi-level as well. Where he makes the tackles within the field, and that's obviously because of this hybrid niche role that he plays for Vitória de Guimarães. And like he averages 1.49 tackles in the defensive area, 1.01 tackles in the midfield area, and 0.10 tackles in the attacking area. That may not seem like an awful lot when we're just rattling off numbers, but it consistently puts him up in the high 80s, low 90 percentile of tackles made in those areas for a centre half within the league, because he's given the opportunity to step out. Now, he also wins 63% of all tackles made, which is a really high number. And if for a defensive midfielder, that's a really good number to have as well. And we're going to take a look at him as well, how he fares against our centre halves, how he fares against our central midfielders as well in a moment. Because when we start talking about where his percentile is within the top 5 leagues in Europe, or even in this instance here, the percentile that FB Ref give is within the next 8 leagues, that's all well and good to say, oh, he's in the top 90% or whatever. But where does he line up against the guys we currently have already? And that's going to be something interesting to see, because he does some good things, and he does other things that our defenders, our centre halves, do much better than him. So we're going to take a look at that in a moment as well. But he's able, like, when you see him, he's got very, very good timing of his tackle. He seems an actually really calm player. I'm really trying to stay away from the Patrick Vieira comparison here for obvious reasons, because he's not going to be as good as Patrick Vieira. I don't think he's going to be. He's not going to be as good as Patrick Vieira, and he doesn't have the passing range that Patrick Vieira had. But and also, it's almost stereotypical to immediately go to that type of comparison when you see a big, tall, all-action, athletic defensive midfielder. It's too easy to go there. But what I will say, I will liken it to, is Patrick Vieira was pretty calm in situations. Now, obviously, he was a fiery character when someone started to throw hands. He was in there. He was definitely in there. He was combative from that point of view, but he was calm. Like he never lost his head in a situation. And you can see this with Ibrahima Bamba, who doesn't lose his head in situations. He doesn't have any rash challenges. It's measured tackling. It's timing tackles, and that's something that's jumped off the page when I was watching him in my scout. And it does, as I say, it's all too apparent, I suppose, really, that obviously you have to take into account the level of opposition that he's playing against as well, but he does look like he's able to calm down situations there, and also playing in this role that he plays by moving out of the back two, or the two centre halves, and they don't play a back five, which is the thing. So he goes in there to create that buffer zone, and then he moves out of that buffer zone with the ball, essentially. Now, he doesn't progress the ball very well, which isn't surprising when you look at what he does. It's not surprising. So, as I said, he's not going to play that 35-yard raking pass. He's not going to play a 1-2 with somebody, beat the midfield press, and then move onwards. He's press resistant when he receives the ball. He seems to be press resistant, albeit once again, I do call into question some of the level of opposition he's played against. But when people put pressure on him, he can get turned and he can lay the ball off. He's not going to be a very progressive player, and I think that, as I say, that is fair to say. If you were to take any look at his at his games as well. So let's take a little look at some of his statistics as I've popped them up here on the screen. So as I mentioned, I wanted to look at him from a centre half's point of view and also from a defensive midfielder point of view. The big thing we can see here with this guy, first and foremost, for me, is looking at his heat map there. It's very much played in his own half of the field. We can see there the action areas, like he is all action. You want that midfield anchor to shield in front of that defensive unit. This guy is he is that shield. And he's very good at it. He's very good at it, playing at the level that he's playing at. And when we look at him here in comparison to Boubacar Kamara, and we look at him here in comparison to Douglas Luiz being the darker red, Boubacar Kamara being the pinkish line there, and I hope you guys can see it. What we can see here is that Ibrahima Bamba puts in a similar amount of tackles to Boubacar Kamara, has a similar amount of interceptions, similar amount of recoveries, similar amount of dribble success rate, albeit maybe about 3 or 4 percentage points lower. Now, where we really see the drop-off from this guy, and as I mentioned, he's not a very progressive player. He does not create scoring chances, but that's fine. Not everybody in your team has to do that. He's not very good at progressive passes. He comes in at the same rating as Douglas Luiz in a pass completion percentage, which is, where is it there? 83.2, nothing to be sniffed at, right in the middle of the park, right in the middle of the ballpark. And he doesn't make an awful lot of passing attempts. So this guy isn't going to be trusted to be able to be that workhorse, but he's going to win the ball back in midfield and allow other players to flourish. I'm not too sure we have that player on our team at the moment. Potentially, you might call it Leander Dendoncker, this player. I just don't know if he doesn't seem to me to be anywhere near as athletic as this guy. Obviously, this guy has Ibrahima Bamba, has a lot of youth in his side. He's only 20, going on 21. I'm really enthused by some of the numbers that you see here. And look, as I say, I know that level of competition needs to be taken into account, but also, you still have to make those tackles, and that is important as well. And as we can see here, he does favour tackling over progression of the ball. But let's see how he looks with regards to the centre half position. So let's take a little look at him here. We have Callum Chambers in the red, Ezra Konsa in the white, and Tyrone Mings in that pinkish colour there as well. Obviously, as I mentioned previously, this guy has made more tackles. He's going to make more tackles than a lot of centre halves, because centre halves usually jockey people into position and they make blocks more so than tackles. But we can see here he's made a lot of tackles based on the role that he was in. Interceptions wise, we can see here Tyrone Mings intercepted more passes than him. He has way more recoveries than anybody else here. I do want to mention as well here that with regards to Callum Chambers, it looks like Callum Chambers is having has been absolutely sparkling. Very small sample set for him, and we've mentioned before that we don't want to include that smaller sample set as much, but it's important to be transparent and to show it up here as well. So that's why I've shown it in this graph here. What we can see from Ibrahima Bamba as well is his aerial duel percentage is much lower than somebody like a Tyrone Mings or a Callum Chambers. And what this graph also shows me as well here is that, and it's not unapparent on the field is that Ezri Konsa is not tasked an awful lot with going up for the ball. It is a Tyrone Mings job, but still, when he does go up for the ball, he only wins about 50% of his aerial duels, or 55 to 56% of his aerial duels, which is something that Bamba does as well. And this is one of the reasons why it leads me to believe he's going to move into midfield a small bit more. So looking at how he stacks up against both our centre halves and our defensive midfielders, I can understand why there's intrigue shown towards this guy. The fact that we do have a deal with Vitória de Guimarães is also interesting to me as well. I wonder if a bid goes in for him. I wonder if it's just conjecture on the media's part or point of view. But I do honestly believe that this guy is going to go somewhere and he's going to have a very, very decent career. He's highly thought of, as I said. There's a lot of clubs been looking at him, and if Aston Villa were to bring this guy in, and he was to learn within the Premier League structures that Aston Villa have now created, I think he could be a good fit for the Premier League based on his profile, based on his athletic profile. But one big thing is he is going to have to progress the ball a small bit more. But that isn't something that is something the players can learn. It can be taught to players. Yes, they may not be brilliant at it. He's only 20 years of age, and I think realistically speaking, he's beginning to move from that centre half role, as I mentioned, into that midfielder role, and I think that's where he's going to end up. And when he is in that midfielder role, he will be tasked with having more passing attempts and having more progression within his passes as well. Because when you look at him here, in comparison to Mings or to Chambers, he has the same relative amount of progressive passes as those guys, and that's important, I think, to show here as well. He's in and around the same level of progressive passes as those as a centre half, but when he moves into midfield, he will be expected to do an awful lot more with the ball because he'll have an awful lot more opportunities to do that with the ball as well. So that's Ibrahima Bamba. Will he sign for Aston Villa? Who knows? But it's an interesting piece. I wanted to take a look at him. I would implore you all to do your own looking up of him and to do your own scouting of him as well. I like him. I can understand why the club will be interested in him as well. If he is somebody that they bring in, I will look at his career arc and his level within Aston Villa with great enthusiasm and see where he can go within the club. And yeah, we're only a short few months, 3 months away now from the transfer window opening again. So all these names are going to ratchet up once more. Aston Villa are doing the work behind the scenes. And as I said, the links with Vitória de Guimarães already, and the fact that Ibrahima Bamba is there too. I know that this guy will be linked again a couple more times before the transfer window starts. So thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Thanks a million for listening as well. If you're listening to the audio podcast, if you like what you see, please subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up below on this as well. It costs you nothing to subscribe. We would love to get our subscribers numbers up so we can do more of this content for you. But until the next time, everybody, I want you all to stay safe, stay healthy, and all that's left to say is up the Villa.